All right, guys, so Joe Biden doing Joe Biden stuff here. New York Post, Biden sending U.S. troops back to Somalia, reversing Trump pullout. Wow. President Biden signed off this month on a plan returning U.S. troops to Somalia and reversing former President Donald Trump's pullout of roughly 700 troops from the East African country. Biden authorized a persistent U.S. military presence in the East African country with an estimated cap of 500 Americans, a U.S. official said Monday on a White House organized call. The move was first reported by the New York Times. The troops will help Somalia's fledgling government fight the al-Shabaab militant group, which is affiliated with al-Qaeda. Quote, "We are proud, first and foremost, to be supporting the Somalis' own efforts to rebuild their own state, and we are working closely with other international partners," the U.S. official said before sidestepping a reporter's question about the possibility of U.S. troops fighting a forever war in the country, a concept against which both Biden and Trump campaigned. Wow, would you look at that? How they campaigned and how they actually governed is totally different. This is a step that rationalizes what essentially an irrational arrangement that we inherited, he replied. It was irrational because it created unnecessary and elevated risk to U.S. forces as they moved in and out of the country on a rotational basis. What? Wait. Is he saying by pulling out of the country, it was an increased risk to U.S. soldiers? Why? If you're out, then you're out. If you're out, then no American's going to get killed. In December of 2020, Trump ordered U.S. troops to withdraw from Somalia, and the Pentagon said the exit had been completed days before Biden took office in January 2021. One of the very few based things that Trump did. On Monday, the U.S. official slammed Trump for removing troops in the first place, against the advice of senior U.S. military leadership. Okay, what about the American people in what's supposed to be a constitutional Republican representative democracy? How many Americans even knew that we were in Somalia at all? How many Americans knew that? And why do you think that in your ivory tower you can just tell the peasants to fuck off and you get to make all the decisions? Our money and our blood, and it's just shut up and sit down and we're going to send them wherever we want to send them. So they're against the advice of senior U.S. military leadership, who, by the way, always wants to do more war, always wants to stay places. Yeah, the Hammer team expressed concern about the nail. No shit. They say the previous administration had directed the withdrawal of approximately 750 U.S. military personnel from Somalia. It was an abrupt and sudden transition to a rotational presence. Okay, well then don't rotate the presence. Look, if you want to help the government of Somalia against the al-Shabaab militants, who are genuinely horrendous. I mean, they are affiliated with al-Qaeda. They're ruthless. I've read a bunch about them. We've covered them at certain points on the channel. If you want to help the government against them, I'm totally fine with that. You want to give them a little bit of material support. You want to give the weapons to, as long as they're not marauding warlords who themselves are terrible, right? You want to help them out? Okay, fine. But why the fuck do we have to be there? We never voted on this. Nobody ever voted on this. It's supposed to be Congress declares war. But the U.S. president, who's the commander-in-chief, is like, yeah, just send them and I'll make my mind up. Thank you very much. The rotational use of special operations troops as needed resulted in losses of time when our operators can be doing the work we want them to do with partners to address terrorist threats, he said. Okay, but terrorist threats, they exist fucking everywhere. They exist everywhere. Should we occupy every country? Is that what we should do? How about we just stop doing the shitty things that we do and that our allies do? Why are we aiding and abetting a genocide in Yemen, for example? Why are we giving Saudi Arabia money and weapons and helping them bomb targets in Yemen that include open-air markets and mosques and schools? Why are we doing that? If we just stop the bad things that we do and we facilitate, a lot of lives would be saved. We don't have to actively fight bad guys. We just need to not, in certain circumstances, be the bad guy ourselves. Don't arm Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra in Syria as we did. But no, it's on the one hand, we arm a bunch of jihadists, and on the other hand, we're we got to go fight the jihadists. Well, what the fuck? Restoring a persistent U.S. military presence will help to increase the security and the freedom of movement for other personnel, such as the State Department and USA colleagues, as they conduct critical diplomatic and developmental missions. What the fuck? The president made this decision to increase the safety and effectiveness of our special operators who have... How does it increase the safety and effectiveness of our special operators when we're there? We could just not be there and then no American is threatened. All right, I don't really want to read any more of this. You guys get the gist of it. This is bullshit. This is bullshit. Now, to be fair to Biden, there is one area where he's been decent on foreign policy. He has massively reduced the drone war. Now, if the numbers are accurate, he's actually almost totally stopped the drone war. But I'm not sure the numbers are accurate because I think Trump on his way out the door changed the rules of reporting around the drone war so you don't have to report about it as much. You don't have to give the numbers as much. So it's possible he's still drone striking and we're just not getting any of the information. But I do think we would have heard from independent investigative organizations that, like, no, they are bombing and there was a bombing here and there was a bombing there and here's the death toll, etc. So just because the U.S. government doesn't officially have to report them anymore doesn't mean we're not going to get any information around that more generally. So I actually do think he probably really reduced the drone war. Good. Look, I'll give credit where it's due. I respect the fact he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. Good. Stood up to the military-industrial complex on that. Great. But of course he drove it into a ditch because then he decided to starve Afghanistan and steal their own money from them. Well, that's not good. And now I'm against you on that part of it. So, but this is an instance of, like, for the love of God, can anybody just be anti-war? Can you just be anti-war? And the answer is no. And don't get it twisted. This was one very rare instance of Trump doing the right thing on foreign policy. Where did he do the wrong thing on foreign policy? In a million places. Remember when he decided randomly to assassinate a top Iranian commander who was on the ground fighting ISIS? Remember that? Almost sparking a global crisis, sparking retaliatory attacks from Shia militias in the region. He just decided, let's illegally massacre a top Iranian commander who's fighting ISIS. And was bragging about it like it was a good thing. That was terrible. Remember when his first military act as president killed a young American girl? Remember that? No, you probably don't remember that because it wasn't really talked about ever. In fact, shame on me because I'm forgetting the name of that girl who I used to know. It was a young American girl who was killed by Trump in his first military act as president. It was a botched raid. It was such a clusterfuck. They asked Obama to approve it previously, and he didn't because he was like, we don't have enough evidence, and this could end bad. Trump approved it. And a young American girl was killed. And then we don't even need to talk about it. He massively escalated in Afghanistan. Super high death toll among civilians in Afghanistan. Then he pretended like he was going to get out, and he didn't get out. He made a deal to get out after he left. But he's a cuck to the deep state because he said we're going to get out, and then he never ended up getting out. So the idea, Syria, it was bombing of Syria under Trump. The idea tried to coup Venezuela, that he was good on foreign policy. Nonsense. On this one very narrow issue of Somalia. Okay. On the one issue of North Korea, where he actually tried to have some dialogue and didn't escalate. Okay. Actually, he did sort of threaten to bomb them early on. But then after that, him and Kim Jong-un met. I thought that was a positive thing, because I prefer peace to war. But in very narrow ways, he was okay. But the overwhelming majority of stuff, he was a continuation of the status quo. So, fuck Trump, fuck Biden, and for the love of God, why would we send troops back to Somalia? I mean, again, this is the easiest example to bring up because of what's happening now, but we have a baby formula shortage. And Joe Biden is spending time in the Oval Office, in the White House, going, yeah, let's send troops back to Somalia. I'll sign off on that. I'll think about that for a little bit. I'll talk about that. Would Americans rather have you being on top of the baby formula shortage 24/7, maybe invoking the Defense Production Act and funding that and using that in order to get baby formula to people? Would they prefer you doing that or sending troops to Somalia? I think we know the answer. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.